Hi, AJ Heightman here, and welcome to the FDIC conference. Our topic today is safety. And with us is Tim Schroeder to my left, Steve Rowland, and Mike McCart. And I'd like each of you to introduce yourself. We'll start with Mike first.
Mike McCart, I'm the Deputy Chief for Pulaski County Ambulance District and a flight medic with Mercy's Lifeline 2.
Steve Rowland, I work with Ferno and the Ambulance Systems Group, and I'm also sitting on the NFPA 1917 Ambulance Standards Committee and involved with CAS and some of the other safety standards that are out there in the industry.
Tim Schroeder, I work with Ferno and I'm Director of Ambulance Systems, working on new concepts and ways to improve safety in EMS.
So we all have safety in mind, and the new standards is something that we really have to talk about. So what kind of safety concerns do you have, do we all have really, about ambulances right now?
I think the ambulance world is coming to a point that maybe the fire service appropriately, since we're at FDIC, came to several years back, and that the paramedics and EMTs on the ambulances have to start accounting for their own personal safety. The firefighters did it years ago when they used to ride on tailboards and used to ride an open cab fire apparatus. That movement is coming on in the ambulance primarily in three areas. One is in the patient safety and making sure the patient is restrained properly on a cot that's survivable in a crash situation. The second, with the provider, that they're safe in their environment that they're working in, that they don't have to and really need to take away all excuses that they need to not buckle up when they're treating a patient from the time they transport to the time they arrive at the hospital. And the third being with the vehicle itself, to make the vehicle safer and provide feedback to the operator that they may be driving too fast or taking some turns a little too sharply that they shouldn't be otherwise, so that you can complete that full picture and make the whole EMS experience safer.
I know we've talked, and you also do work as a flight medic.
Yes.
You wouldn't dare get in a helicopter and take off from a landing zone without being fully secured.
Oh, absolutely not.
And
Yeah.
stuff, jostles, moves around, and I think even in the ambulance side of things, I'm sure your crews understand that it's not just about getting in an accident, it's about somebody braking fast.
Absolutely.
And
There's
so,
there's
talk about
services
that.
out there now that we've all known people that are no longer with us, that are no longer working. There's a couple guys that I know that it was a hard break, fell forward, hit his head on the ALS cabinet, and he hasn't been to work for 6 months. And it could be the fact that he never comes back just from a traumatic brain injury from a sudden braking episode.
Yeah, and I had a friend who just flew forward into the front wall and did his clavicle in, and now he can't lift anymore, so he's off the job.
Right. Yeah.
And he cries to me all the time that he misses it, but for Christmas sakes, if he only would protect himself. And I always tell people that if we didn't have a grab rail, most of us would have been injured, because I've moved around ambulances, I admit it, and if I didn't have that grab rail, I'd have been hurt 100 times.
And you think about that grab rail, though, how effective really is that, though? I mean, it's great if
effective until your body shifts.
That's right. So it's good in a parking lot, but if you get out on the open road, that grab rail is not going to do much for you.
And to add what Steve was talking about, even the patient moving and handling prior to even getting them in the truck. Once we get them in the truck and they're all locked down into the cot, that's well and good. But how do we get them from the house to the truck? We've all done this in the past, where we hope and a prayer and a strap on a Walmart kitchen chair and hope that nothing breaks. Well, now the powered stair chairs and the powered cots, so we're not breaking our backs and injuring our people, trying to get the patient from point A to point B.
But what I continually have people forget about, they're saying about protecting the crew, but if you're jostling around or if you don't have your equipment secured, the patient is a liability laying right there. All I have to do is have a monitor fall on their head, or have an O2 bottle fly, and I've seen accidents when I've investigated them where a spare O2 bottle's up in the dashboard somewhere.
Absolutely. Right.
Or the medic.
The poor patient's strapped down, they can't get out of the way.
So why do you think everybody is so resistant to change?
I think it's just an uncomfortable human nature. It's that we're going into uncharted territories, going into unfamiliar zones, and maybe you feel like you're restricting your movement. You feel like you don't have as much freedom to do what you want to do. But the reality is that if you got into an accident that day, you're not going to be around tomorrow to provide that service anyway. So why don't we get ourselves safe? Let's do it. Let's create ourselves an environment where we can be safe and do our jobs well and provide that care.
You can probably address that the most from the standards that are being developed. We took a box that was designed really for the military 30 years ago, and designed ambulances and labeled it KKK specifications. And now everybody says, and the stretchers have certainly changed, well, I can't reach my patient. That's because our design hasn't changed, right?
Right. Well, we're in a situation in a kind of a unique industry in the public safety sector that although we attend classes and educational components to our training that teach us the clinical aspect of our jobs, a lot is handed down from those older paramedics and EMTs that we work with who oftentimes have the mindset we've never done it that way before. So when I hear a provider talk to me and talk about I'm unable to do my job with my seatbelt on. I just can't do it with my seatbelt on. And you start going a little deeper and say, well, how many of your transports are non-emergency? Well, probably 80%. Well, how many of those are just chronic from the lonely grandmother at the nursing home that wants to go in that we have to transport versus a truly traumatic vehicle accident or gunshot that may require a little more action? And then there's even the clinical aspect that perhaps those patients should be treated to a point where you're able to buckle in and transport them safely too. So once you start whittling away all the excuses that are just tradition-based, there's really not many that are left.
And you know, I always hear people say that it's excuses, but the reality is it's been poor design.
Sure.
I can't sit in the back of an ambulance with my back against a wall and see my patient 5 feet away and I can't reach them.
That's true.
So from the standard size, what hope do we have coming? What do you see in the new standards?
There's a couple of things that come into play. The Department of Homeland Security, through multi-governmental agency contribution from NIST and NIOSH and other acronyms that are out there in the EMS world, along with industry partners, put out a guidebook published by Department of Homeland Security concerning the safety factors and ergonomics that are the best, could be the best practices in an ambulance. And the Society of Automotive Engineers, the SAE, the body that puts together testing requirements for even for motor oil and the compounds tires are made out of and all sorts of other things, worked with those industry partners to develop 3 key standards that were introduced earlier this year for the cot restraint and the patient restraint on the cot, the way it's mounted, the loose equipment and the way that it's mounted, and the seating that the patients or that the providers rather sit in. And they all come together and with references to reach and being able to access from a small 5th percentile female to a 95th percentile male, and make sure that everything is within reach that you'll need most of the time. Maybe you can't reach the OB kit or a spare blanket all the time without having to get unbuckled before the unit starts rolling. But all the safety points are pointing toward scientifically based, evidence-driven standards versus kind of the best efforts that were given before.
That's the key. Is when you look around, you've got government involvement, you've got industry involvement, and we're all coming together for the same cause. There's not a fight here.
Exactly.
You know, it's about working together. We know this is the right thing to do. So let's get together, set the right standards, make it so that they're actually usable standards, and make it so that we can actually afford to use those standards. So you put that all together, and we got a winner.
Is if you look at the national conferences and stuff, it wasn't 5 years ago that I'd go to an international or a national conference. There might be one 30-minute to an hour class on safety all week. Now when you go to these conferences, the Zoll Summit, when I go there, they have an entire safety track every day, all week long. And you've seen the industry chart to change. Now if we start adopting more of a just culture where it's okay to talk about near misses and it's okay to talk about some of the incidents we had, and we have to have protection so when we do quality assurance and QA processes that's not discoverable, so we can discuss the problems that we're having. Those are some of the things I think we still need to focus on.
And the exciting thing for me is it's no longer okay to have a vehicle rear-ended on a highway. We have chevron striping, we have reflective stuff, and years ago that wasn't accepted. Right. And really the fire service led the charge by striping engines and ladders, and now most ambulances have striping, and that's just the way it is.
Makes sense.
And you can't step out on a highway now. I know when I stop at scenes, I've got a little vest that I put on, everybody puts a vest on. That wasn't very sexy years ago, and it's not sexy, it's safe, and that's accepted. So I think that it's time that people are tired of our crews getting hurt because they felt like there's nothing we could do because the ambulance standards really weren't that way. So what kind of changes, like for example, I'm not a big lover of the squad bench. We're not going to be forced to have a squad bench anymore, right? But what are they going to recommend with seating? That it be adjustable and you could be able to move it?
The squad bench has been out of the Triple K standard for the last couple of generations, although it's still predominantly used out there for multiple patient transports, and I think that's where some of the innovations that Ferno's come out with being able to use aviation or military style litter mounts within the ambulance for secondary patient transportation helps. And I think that the getting over the hump that most of the paramedics and providers out there are in the 19 to 24-year-old age range, and they've grown up. I think this helps us. They've grown up always wearing their seatbelts, likely in their personal vehicles, or being in car seats even as a kid. So we're fortunate that those cultures of safety are coming together. But without the squad bench, when it eventually hopefully goes away, to have a forward-facing seat, that's really the safest position that you can be in. And as you see on the Ferno demonstration vehicle behind us, I think Mike would agree that treating a patient with that forward-facing seat isn't nearly as difficult as what it was thought before it was put into action.
Not a bit. In my concept and the way that we're operating on our ambulance service is that I don't even want that forward-facing seat to rotate. My problem with having a rotating forward-facing seat is that once you rotate it, you're in a bench.
Right.
And if you allow them to rotate it to a bench, then you've done nothing more than give them another bench.
A single seat bench.
Yeah, so you're still facing all the same problems that you were having.
Ergonomically, we've seen it in Germany and other places, you're not allowed to ride sideways. Sure. The reality is, if I'm riding sideways and that has a front impact, my neck is still going to snap to the left, and you're not protected.
No, the human body doesn't handle the lateral load that well.
Exactly. Mike's also works in an air ambulance environment, and you think of our most critical patients, the most serious traumas or most serious cardiac patients that we need to fly out in order to get care. They're in the smallest operating environment possible with the best clinicians, and it just shows you that providing that care, if laid out properly in advance, and no one goes to a helicopter that they just throw together at the last minute. There's planning that goes into it, and evaluation and field trials and studies, and you end up with something that looks like that.
It's going to take someone to step outside the box and think a little differently, though, because we're so used to, in this industry, is having everything we would need for a week's worth of calls, at our fingertips and around this mobile environment. So if we're willing to reimagine that, then we can start to think about, okay, what does it take to be safe in this location, have our supplies around us, and just have what we need in that moment, so we can really improve the design.
And I still base it on what I call stodgy design, which was you got an ambulance and it had a cabinet that was a foot deep. So we put 150 4x4s in there to fill up the cabinet. And the reality, when we inventory our vehicle, we never go past 5 4x4s. You know what I mean?
And it's one of the interesting things with this integrated patient transport system, the NTRAC system that Ferno offers, is in the studies leading up to it, we're transporting a lot of air in our ambulances, just like you say, the box of IV starts with the blanket rolled up behind it just to keep it forward. When that first IV set's used, it's restocked and one's put right back in the same place with dead space behind it and expiring sets behind it as well. So
talk about the crash testing standards and the G-forces that are going to be guaranteed in the ambulance of the future.
The SAE J3027 is the COT standard, and that's what I'm most familiar with. I'll speak to that. Tim can probably talk to some of the others as well. But it really scientifically requires the ambulance stretcher, the cot mount, and the restraints that hold the patient on the cot to survive the equivalent of a 30-mile-an-hour crash. When you say a 30-mile-an-hour crash, oftentimes that's not really a high-speed event. That's not a big deal. But you think of it as it gets into physics and a right of weight, as we call it. But if a 12,000-pound ambulance hits a 3,000-pound passenger vehicle head-on at 55 miles an hour, the ambulance decelerates to about 28 miles an hour, which is less than that 30-mile-an-hour difference. So that's that kind of traumatic, violent event that happens, whereas the car decelerates backwards about 85 miles an hour, and that's a non-survivable incident. It's the same factors and criteria that the National Insurance Institute and those type of groups use to design passenger vehicles. So for the first time, there are components that are going to be built to those standards. What's the nicest piece about that, because the SAE, more or less an independent organization, is the backer and the developer of those standards, whether you comply with the NFPA 1917 standard, whether you comply with the evolving CAS GVS 2015, or if you're in a Triple K state or a state with no regulations, everyone can reference that standard and say, I want that survivable cot in my ambulance.
Are all these testings, are they going to be static or are they going to be dynamic? Because I know in the past they used to just do static pull tests. And from a working practitioner, it never made a lot of sense to me that it took 4,000 pounds to pull this box off the side of the wall.
Right.
When in dynamic situations and the truck's taking forces from different angles, it's not a slow static pull that's going to be affecting it. So are these going to be actual dynamic rolled crash tests?
They are. These are all dynamic tests done not necessarily in an ambulance body itself, but in a test facility on a sled that's accelerated to 30 miles an hour with all sorts of instrumentation and cameras and slow motion cameras that the two primary manufacturers of cots in the United States have products that will comply. Some have a greater availability of products that will comply currently, but it's nice because as a manufacturer of a cot, you don't have to build one cot to this standard and one to another and one to another, one for Colorado, one for New Mexico, one for New York State. You can build, everyone meets the same standard.
And talk about rollovers though. Will rollovers be affected?
Rollovers are in there's another yet SAE committee that's working on body integrity, and that'll be not only from forward impact crashes, but from rollover and from side shear. So if you encounter that near head-on collision where we've all seen the pictures of half the ambulance torn off, we're as an industry working toward making that stronger. Now, we're not going to be a locomotive. I mean, you could build an ambulance for $2 million that was
should still hold in a rollover.
Exactly. Yes.
I think what's nice about this is you're dealing with science. I mean, this isn't something where you're just kind of a fudge factor in the air.
Opinion.
I mean, you're measuring these impulses, with tested bodies, tested vehicles, so we understand what it takes, to hold through this event. Likewise, you've got the cot standard, but we've also got the equipment.
Oh, yeah.
So we can keep a patient safe, we can keep a medic in a chair, but to your point, if that oxygen cylinder flies or that defib flies, I mean, what's the point? You're gonna take them out. So we've got to keep the body, and we got to keep the integrity of the equipment there too. So that's been a big charge on the equipment mount subcommittee, is to make sure that equipment stays where it's designed to be, and make sure that the medics and patients are going to stay safe.
Yeah, it drives me crazy, whether it be a TV show or whether I'm doing a ride-along, and I see a crew that they'll get in, they're taking care of a patient, the patient's secured well to the stretcher, but they set their monitor on the squad bench or on a shelf,
Or on their
whatever,
lap. Yeah,
whatever,
sure.
and an
Yeah.
O2 bottle
Next
is
to
laying loose, and it's just a missile laying right there.
Right.
I think we've all seen it,
Well, there's law enforcement cases where a Streamlight flashlight or a 3D cell flashlight in the back deck of the back of the vehicle, that officer involved in a crash, it comes through and life-ending injuries based on just that. A missile is the perfect analogy.
It's not just crash. I mean, think about it. I mean, crashes are just the times that we get reported and we see the happenings. How many times? Exactly. You take a hard corner and you're walking. Okay, let's look at the back of the ambulance. How many times have we looked in the back of an ambulance and you got a patient there and you got oxygen lines going this way, you got 12 leads going that way, you got an IV drip. You may have a suction line.
Ninja obstacle course
So
you've
yeah,
got
I mean,
going
it's
on.
like a
Exactly.
spider maze in the back,
Sure.
and you're trying to climb over these, not rip out that IV line, and then they take a hard corner, or they suddenly come to a stop.
And all the
you can
supply
speak
speed
to
while
that.
you're sitting on the bench seat or on the opposite side of your patient, 18 inches in the back of that cabinet.
Right. And one of the most fascinating things I kind of come back to is from statistics days or whatever, for every injury-causing incident, there's an average of 300 near misses that happen before that takes place. And so if the industry can come together and take that away, put the mean time between injuries at that higher number, and we're never going to eliminate it, but if we don't, as an industry, supply the tools and the mechanics and the ability for services to implement that, then shame on us. If they don't implement it, then that's something that has to be happening.
NAEMT now actually came out with a report.
Right.
Well, and that goes back to where we're just now getting into this just culture, to where it's okay for us to have a reporting thing, where the fire department have had these avenues and after incident reviews and just near misses and things like that, so everybody in the industry can learn from it. We've got to get away from that stigma where if we talk about our own little mistakes and our near misses, it doesn't make us look poor.
No, not at all.
That makes everybody else learn from it. And if one person can survive from my mistake that didn't hurt me, then we all win.
And I think, we've talked about resistance to change, we've talked about the culture of safety, but I think I'm really happy today to say that we're really beyond that now. Most people have adopted the culture of change. Most people have looked at the Ferno 20 vision. You promised certain things and you delivered on those. And now we got a proof of concept vehicle here, which you're really one of the leaders in the nation on. I really want to congratulate you on that. And what we have behind us, we can just kind of talk about conceptually, because I'm sure they'll see lots about it in the proof of concept. But essentially, you have a vehicle that's been built around the patient, and a customer can customize where they want their monitor and everything else. And I've been going to Retmobile and other places for years, and really what this whole concept has done is it's brought the European concept to the United States, so that we have smaller chairs, we have computers that fold up and out, we don't have to have everything fixed and in one location. And so tell us a little bit about the thought behind your proof of concept.
We're extremely excited about it. We started out just using rolly bags and office partitions, and we had our crews sit down with all of our products and figure out with Velcro where things were going to fit. And now when the crews come on duty, like he was saying, from the 5th percentile individual to the 95th percentile individual, they can modify the vehicle to be as ergonomic as they want it to be, where they feel the things are supposed to be at. They feel more comfortable. I think if you feel more comfortable and you feel more secure and everything's at your hands, then you spend more time taking care of your patient instead of trying to figure out, okay, how am I going to do this dance of death to get around to the other side to start something?
And for the viewers, really, I mean, somebody said to me, what were we going to be talking about? And I said, we're going to be talking about the safest Lego ambulance you've ever seen.
Absolutely.
And it's really a Lego ambulance, only it's a safe Lego ambulance where that everything fits into a solid mount that'll hold how many Gs?
26 Gs. I mean, we've
That's
designed
incredible.
this for the last few years. And it was a great circumstance that Mike was thinking about the same things we were developing at the same time. We got together and pulled this vehicle off. But you look at the system, and we've now we've made a safe ambulance. Okay, we've got a safe ambulance. Everything is 26G crash stable. That's your starting point. But now, why not, since we're clean sheet of papering this anyway, why not we make this environment more usable and more effective in the field, and make it so that it's safer not only for the transport, but also safer for the patient, because they've got a medic that can provide better care with more access to their equipment and supplies. So we've really tried to reimagine this vehicle and put it on a new level.
Is you've taken a Sprinter chassis, which a lot of the crews are like, oh, I don't want the Sprinter chassis. And years ago at the Olympics in Salt Lake City, they gave me some Sprinter ambulances that were going to be used on the slopes and things, and the crews didn't like them because they had this big squad bench, this big stretcher, and you couldn't even fit in the inside. Your vehicle, actually, the rear doors, you load your patient, there's still cabinetry in the back, and then inside there's plenty of room for you to be able to access the patient, because you haven't given me a foot deep cabinet, you actually have kits. Explain how the kits work.
Well, absolutely. What we did is we initially, when we were talking with Ferno about the proof of concept and what we wanted to do, if you took that 18-inch cabinet, like we was talking about, instead of having 120 4x4s to fill up that space, take that 18-inch cabinet and you stand it up and you put it on the wall. So now it's only 3 or 4 inches deep,
right,
but you can see everything and it's all easy hands. So now, like you had said, instead of having 1.5 feet of intrusion into the center of the thing, you've pushed everything out to the walls. So you get in there and you're thinking it's going to be tight, but it's not. You can still sit in the seat, you can operate everything you need, and you can see it. You can reach across and get what you need. You can touch your monitor. You can still touch from your patient's shins to the top of their head.
And if you're going to use CPAP, you can actually grab it. It's magnet mounted. It'll come right out of the wall mount, and you can do whatever you need to do.
Slide it down to where you want to put it. Now it's right across from you to control everything, and it's still in a 26G locked up environment. It's not laying on the patient's lap.
And you know what I like is that if I get in with a patient now in his vehicle and they're secured in a stretcher and I'm ready to go and I think I need my trauma pack and I need my CPAP or whatever, I can pull those out and I can put them right down on the patient lap, let's say, for example, and I don't have to be reaching across the ambulance. It's almost like going into a supermarket.
And inside the soft wall design is totally configurable yourself. So if you get in that morning and you decide, okay, I only want one IV set up here, so I'll just take this bag out and put it over here, but I like the CPAP, I'm gonna need that over here, so I'm right there. And you just reconfigure your walls to meet how you're going to do it.
But years ago, you couldn't buy a vehicle like that unless you paid $5,000 to put a special cabinet there.
Right.
And then a month later, you didn't like that cabinet there. But your design, you could simply loosen it, put it back in, and change your design.
For the vehicle manufacturer, when they built that $5,000 option for that special cabinet, chances are that was the only one they built. The next ambulance that came down the line had another $5,000 option, just slightly different, and so there was no economy of scale that the builders would be able to realize and affect the price of the ambulance, because we kind of kick around in some groups that if you've seen one ambulance, you've seen one ambulance, because everyone contends that their design is right, and maybe it is right for them, but with this ambulance, the builders, with this design, the builders are able to build the receptacle for all the equipment, and then once it's delivered, the user, the provider, can put it in any position that you need to have it.
About the modularity and the resistance to change. And really, we're not changing much. We're just making it secure. So when you look at a back of an ambulance, what do you see on the squad bench? You'll see a nest of IV supplies, that are laid out right next to them because they don't want to get up and walk across the vehicle when they're going down the road. The only thing we've done is we've taken those supplies and we've made them secure in a location right next to them. So it's not that big of a change, it's just a different approach.
And the other thing I like is I could take one of the wall-mounted equipment supplies at an MCI, take it right out of the vehicle and put it in my patient treatment area.
Absolutely. Some of the feedback that we've heard, obviously Ferno EMS is a company that's designed around EMS for nearly the 60 years that we're celebrating this year, but I've had several of the fire apparatus manufacturers come up to me, and you can see the wheels turning, saying in heavy rescues and compartments and fire trucks, what an ideal option this would be to mount that equipment as well.
We discussed when we built with Spherical the new oxygen caddy thing that's sitting in there. Or basically it's a cascade system, so instead of lifting heavy M-tank bottles around and trying to transfer these big heavy M-tank bottles, we have jumbo E light tanks that weigh 8 pounds with a regulator full of oxygen. The 3 tanks together provide more oxygen than an M-tank, and the entire system is removable out of the truck and weighs less than an empty M-tank.
Right.
Yeah, so now we show up to a mass cow, we can set up a treatment and triage area, take all of our bags off the walls, take our oxygen system out of the truck, set that triage treatment center up, take our litter arms, put them in the wall, and now we have a truck that's designed to transport because all of our gear is set up in a treatment and triage area.
Yeah, and you actually have the treatment. You have the extra arms for the litters in the back of the unit, so you just click them, flip them in, secure them, and put extra litters in it again.
That's right.
Yeah, it's taken us back to a concept that's a 40-year-old concept. And
Sure.
the military uses it all the time.
Absolutely.
I'm on an MMCI and I want to take 4 people to the hospital with one set of kits and one radio, and off I can go. And then the other nice thing with your spherical system is I could take that out and I could set it up for firefighter rehab. Absolutely. So all of a sudden I can have a multi-port, I could have 5 firefighters feeding off some oxygen, because you know that first ambulance that's there is beached.
Yep,
It's
they're
never going to be
dedicated.
used, so you might as well strip the equipment out and use it. And this is a really effective, efficient way to do it.
You know, there's other issues on safety that we talk a lot about, the mechanical safety of this, which it does have. But the other side of that is that we've incorporated electrical safety as well. So using onboard monitoring systems, that monitor and coach driving behaviors. They give real-time reports about the operation of that vehicle, whether it's within safety protocols or not, back to management. Mike can get a text message sent to him every time they dynamically speed over 10 miles an hour over the speed limit, because he chose to receive that message. Or if someone's not going to wear a seatbelt, he can get that message. So it's
and how are the crews adapting to that? Because they used to think it was Big Brother, but now they realize that it's going to save you on braking, it's going to save them on injuries. Have they accepted it more?
We've not had any problems at all with that. You're right, when we first started putting the driver modification systems in and the camera systems in the ambulance, you always had that Big Brother watching me thing. But what they realized was they forgot about the cameras. If you're doing the right thing, the cameras are just there to protect you.
Right.
In the driver modification stuff, they like the ride so much better. The EMTs are happy that the people in the back aren't yelling at them because the drive is so rough.
Right.
We don't get complaints from passengers anymore saying that it felt like I was riding on a buckboard in the back of your ambulance. We've seen dramatic reductions in our maintenance costs because now we're not threshold braking and driving like we're at the Indianapolis 500, on these ambulances. So we've seen tire wear and tear go down, brake wear and tear go down. We're doing a lot better on that kind of things.
Track equipment, does the ACE-TEC system help you with inventory?
Yeah, we're beta trialing a system right now. That's an RFID system that will track onboard equipment, large assets, And that trial is going really well. So hopefully here within the next few months, we should be able to have a system that's able to be on board and can give you an automatic inventory list of everything that's on board.
But if something's left behind, I could tell if it's left behind as well.
That's the beauty of it. You know, so how many times have we left a first-in bag back at scene, accidentally, only to find out that, when you get back it may be gone. So the moment the vehicle drives away, you get an in-cab alert and you get a remote alert back at the supervisor station saying, hey, this vehicle's left scene, it's left this device behind, and here's a map on how to go get it.
But what I like as a supervisor, we're doing a big article in JEMS on suction. Suction is the #1 piece of equipment that's left behind at an unconscious, unresponsive patient. The crews run in, they forget to take the suction, and with something like ACE-TAC and RFID, you can tell just with a manager's report, you went to an unconscious, unresponsive, you got out of the vehicle, you took your monitor, but you left your suction unit. Why did that happen? And that's behavior modification, but the reality is if I'm laying inside with an esophageal varices that's broke loose, I need my suction unit.
Well, you think of another scenario, you get a call for my child's unconscious. Well, it turns out it may be an adult child that's disabled and living at home, they're 30 years old, so you've brought the PED bag in, you've got to go back out, get the adult bag, and you never remember the PED bag is in there, so it's left behind. And it's one of the things that's always a little bit amusing is when you speak to a group of people about leaving equipment behind, and as not being in an EMS provider role for a number of years, you say, well, how many of you left the defibrillator behind? And it's just a slow response that hands start to go up one after the other, that it's all happened, and nobody admits to it. It was always the other shift, but we understand that it happens.
The innovation kit, because you intubated, and then you left the kit.
You don't need the kit anymore, sure.
Yeah, so you just kind of hurried up and rushed off.
Yeah, none of us would ever admit leaving the building after inventorying our vehicle and cleaning it and going on a call and leaving our stretcher behind. We'd never admit that. I would admit to that.
Radio on a bumper, I mean, it's endless. Absolutely.
I track my dog when he leaves the parameters of the house. He sends me a text message, hey, I'm out. So why shouldn't I do that with my equipment? Absolutely. So we're actually, the Ferno 2020 Vision program, I was honored to be looking at it a couple years ago, and they've delivered on the stretchers. They're now delivering on the proof of concept vehicle. So, congratulations to all of you that have been involved with Ferno, but it has to be really good for you to have this vehicle here to see your baby being born, right?
We're really thrilled. We're really thrilled. It's a big moment in our company's history as we transform our business from patient handling into more of a systematic environment, looking at the big issues, working with the folks in the industry, and trying to come with meaningful, actionable solutions. So this has been really great. It's been a great partnership. We've gone through a process and we have a little bit left to go. So this is a proof of concept. We're learning a lot about this vehicle, and we're taking that, we're rolling that back into the final product. So we come out later this year, we'll have a system that's crash stable, able to be deployed right away, and integrated into vehicle designs.
Couldn't have asked for better partners. Ferno's been awesome to sit and work with us on this and ask all the questions and take every bit of feedback.
What you wanted them to do?
Osage was phenomenal. This wouldn't have worked if it wasn't for the fact that Osage was so open to give us all the time. And I'd sat down with Kenny and the guys from Osage at least once a month, sometimes 2 and 3 times a month, and we would sit and move things around and dry fit this and try that. And every time I came up, they just tolerated me bringing more and more of my employees with me that wanted to come in and see it and give their 2 cents and add to this and get a different perspective, so it wasn't just my truck, it was everybody's truck.
Well, what I want to say to the audience really is all of the stuff that Steve, Mike, and Tim have been doing has really been a hot topic here at FDIC. The reality is we've talked about what's been a hazard, what's been the resistance to change, and the proof of concept vehicle, and all of the things that we've talked about are really encouraging for the viewers. You're going to be hearing an awful lot about this because it's the buzz of the industry, and it's only going to get better. I know that when I saw the initial ideas that were being rolled out and proof of concept, etc., I was like, I'm not sure, I can't see it, I don't know about this, I don't know about that, but I can tell you from what I saw in here, I'm really hot and excited about this. This is really great.
It's a neat phenomenon to watch. If you follow social media, you can see there's a segment that haven't been exposed to it that are still thinking that place that you were with, well, I'm not really sure. And then there's a segment that have seen it in person and they're like, this is the greatest thing I've ever seen.
Well,
so it's
what's going to happen is the ambulance manufacturers, I've seen them all be very open to change. I come back from Repmobile, I do articles, and they're like, well, what? If you don't start putting smaller compact seats in, somebody else is going to do it. Well, we don't know how to do that. Well, the Ferno concept vehicle has it. And I don't need this stuff, I need this stuff. It's here, and I think what's going to happen is when people see the proof of concept, they're going to be saying to any ambulance manufacturer, can we get that? Yeah. Can we get that? And they're going to pretty much demand it.
We've always done it that way, to we don't do it that way anymore.
No.
That's the change that we have to make.
And the answer is yes, because we can do that. We can come together. We're developing this system to be a broad-scale system. It's going to be a global product. They're adopting this style system. We're building concept vehicles just like this in the UK, in the France, in the Netherlands.
And the modular stuff, what is the brand name? What are you calling that?
We're calling it the N-Track system.
The N-Track.
Yep, it's an integrated track system. So we're integrating all these components that go inside, making it modular, making it flexible, so that not only is it safe, but it's more effective for use.
And I think what you're going to want to look for is that N-Track system, because everybody's going to be talking about that. So AJ Heightman, the great panel, thank you guys very much for being with us today.
Appreciate it.
And I would say to all the viewers, just travel safe and look at this whole concept.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.